curious what role a hammer plays when setting up my bench grinder to give me consistent and repeatable angles on my cutting tools? Stick around, I'll show you. How's it? My name is Dylan and welcome to another edition of Ply Creations. This one is unscripted and somewhat unplanned. I've just finished shooting an episode where I show you how I go about sharpening and setting up this chisel, and I prepare or grind the primary bevel using my bench grinder. I don't take you in this episode, well, the previous episode I've just finished, I don't take you through the full process of where I set up the bench grinder to get the angles that I want. I've also done a video on my channel where I converted a standard scraper for my lathe to a negative rake scraper, and I've had some comments on that video that viewers would like me to show you or show them how I go about setting up my bench grinder to get consistent and repeatable angles. You may note that I'm not saying accurate angles. The accuracy of your angles and hitting exact degrees, let's say 25 degrees on a primary bevel for a hand plane or a chisel, isn't as important as some would like you to believe. However, consistency is quite important, and this is what I'm aiming for. I'm not using all kinds of funny jigs. The method is somewhat rudimentary, and I use the marker trick as a beginning. So I'll take you over to the bench grinder and I'll show you how I go about setting it up and using my hammer to do so. So on to setting up the tool rest for my bench grinder. You will need probably the most important part, a permanent marker. This will tell you where you are removing metal. I need my hammer, preferably something with a soft face. A rubber mallet will do. Climbing buddy of mine used to call this a Woyle hand operated impact loader, so you'll need one of those. You'll need a protractor, not absolutely crucial for the process. I do like using it as a sanity check. And then last but not least, you need a tool to sharpen. You may notice that I've already got some marker on it for practice run. So quickly show you how I go about. First is you need to mark your primary bevel. This one's a nice big marker, really quick in doing it. So with the primary bevel marked, I now go over to the tool rest on my grinder, and I want a ballpark setting that is close to the existing bevel angle that I have on my tool. Generally, I have all my tools, at least plane blades and chisels, at 25 degrees primary bevel, so I know that if I'm removing metal in the middle of this bevel, I'm close to 25 degrees, but we're doing the rough setup first. On your side of the camera, I have a window. So all I do is I place the blade on the grinder, loosen the tool rest, and eyeball where the tool is in relation to the wheel. And if I don't see any light coming through between the tool and the wheel, I tighten down the tool rest. Okay. So with that setting done, I'm going to run up the grinder, just let it start, and then start checking where I'm removing material and do the necessary adjustments as I go along. At the moment, I'm removing material a little bit on the low side, so that means that my tool rest angle is low towards the wheel. This is where the hammer comes into play. Give it a slight tap. I've seen it move. Now I'm removing a little bit high, so I've gone too far. I'm going to tap it slightly back. Great. Now I'm removing metal in the middle of the bevel, so I'm happy with where I am. What I sometimes go back and do is just make sure the tool rest is tight, nice and tight. And then what I'll do is I'll proceed to shape the primary bevel. I only go as far as when I feel a burr in the back, and that means, well, that tells me that my primary bevel is reset and that I've removed the secondary bevel on my chisel. So I'm going to go through that process. You'll notice that I am removing metal a little bit high on the bevel. It's not all that critical. Accuracy is not what I'm going for here. I'm going for repeatability. Ballpark 25 degrees is good enough. And how I do the sanity check is, and I also don't need to finish the full bevel before I do the check, is I use the protractor. I place the back of the blade on the bar here and I slide the bevel up and I check where my bevel lies. So I typically will take it, lift it up, see if I can see any light between the protractor and the primary bevel of the chisel, and if I don't see any light or I'm very close, I'm happy to continue with the rest of the process. I will then leave the tool rest typically set to where it is. I will do flat work where I reset the bevels on my plane blades or my chisels, and then I have it already set. And then sometimes when I go over to turning and I need to sharpen my turning tools, I set it for those particular angles and just leave it until I next time need to adjust it. But that, in short, is how I set up my bench grinder to get the bevels that I'm wanting for my tools. Quite rudimentary, but surprisingly effective. And that's it, guys. That's how you use a hammer to set up for grinding bevels on your tools. It also brings us to the end of this edition of Ply Creations. As always, thank you so much for joining me here in my workshop. And if you found any value in this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps other woodworkers find my channel. I'm also leaving a barcode on the screen that you can scan, get to a link that you can sign up at and get access to my free download library. Go and have a look around there. You might find something that you can print out and keep at your bench in your workshop to help you out. As always, it was fun to have you here in my workshop for this unscripted and, as I mentioned, somewhat unplanned edition. But as always, thank you for joining me, and until I see you again next time, have a good one. Cheers.